closed. Right now, the Stevenson runs 32 minutes, 3:55 to the drive. Kennedy. The Ryan downtown exit ramps are blocked again this morning. The Kennedy reversibles are closed. Travel time 29 minutes. O'Hare to downtown. Outbound it's 22. Inbound Eisenhower, a little heavy approaching the Burns Circle where access to downtown remains blocked. There are security perimeters around many suburban shopping areas. It's traffic. I'm Jim Talamonte. On AM 560, The Answer.
Chicago's Morning Answer continues next in our 1-hour heating and air conditioning weather center. Sunshine, record-breaking temps, probably 94. We'll see. The record was set back in 1944, and that was 92. Heavy thunderstorms could develop overnight. Really heavy storms north of the Wisconsin border in the forecast, and a low of 73. Currently 71. Next news at 9. Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
Listen to AM 560, The Answer, online at 560theanswer.com, on the AM 560 mobile app, on your Alexa-powered smart speaker, on TuneIn, iHeart, and radio.com. If you're looking for the latest news, insight into what it means, and the sharpest opinion, there's only one station in Chicago where you can turn, and it's this one. We're AM 560, The Answer.
Good morning, Dan and Amy. In 2015, amid riots in Baltimore, then Mayor Stephanie Rawlings Blake said the following: I made it very clear that I worked with the police and instructed them to do everything they could to make sure the protesters were able to exercise their right to free speech. It's a very delicate balancing act, because while we tried to make sure that they were protected from the cars and other things that were going on, we also gave those who wished to destroy space to do that as well. And we worked very hard to keep the balance and put ourselves in the best position to de-escalate. Do you remember how Stephanie Rawlings Blake was ridiculed for the safe space to destroy that she provided rioters?
Yeah, it ruined her career.
Now it's policy in every major city.
Yeah.
5 years ago, this was the subject of ridicule. 5 years later, it is policy popularly supported by the left in every big city in America.
Yeah. Mayor Lightfoot put out a press release saying we need a plan to protect the protesters and police. It should be we need a plan to protect the citizens of Chicago, business owners, and police. Why are they catering to the protesters who are / really rioters?
Well, and protesters who are peaceful and not rioters, and there's a distinction between the two.
Fine.
And anybody who's acting peacefully and exercising their rights, not a problem. Anybody who isn't, problem. Is that so complicated? I don't think so. For more on this, we're pleased to be joined by Ed Morrissey, senior editor for hotair.com. Ed, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Good morning. Great to be on with you.
Morning. So how about that quick move? By the way, Nicole Hannah-Jones, she of the infamous 1619 Project, Pulitzer Prize winner, she quoted Martin Luther King over the weekend from a letter he wrote in 1967 in an interview with Christiane Amanpour, saying what you have in, and she's bastardizing King's words, of course, but she's a Pulitzer Prize winner and a plagiarist, so it's not or certainly ahistorical. So it's not surprising. But she essentially says what you have here is not looting. It's not thievery. It's a symbolic taking born of the greater crimes of white society.
No, it's actually looting. You can ask some of the business owners who, some of them, especially in the Minneapolis area that the looters were targeting, who aren't white, whether or not it's thievery and whether or not it's restorative justice. It's looting, it's thievery, it's extremely bad. And the problem is that this is what you get when you leave a vacuum. And it's not the first time we've learned this. And the way to put an end to it is to end the vacuum. You have to fill the space with law enforcement and security. And if people don't trust the local police department, then you call out the National Guard to do it. And that's really what the Twin Cities should have done right off the bat, especially in Minneapolis, where people clearly don't trust the police department. Right. They would have been smart to call up some National Guard units right off the bat to keep the police department on a lower profile.
And then as a Minnesotan, how do you feel? I mean, you had these big celebrity stars. Instead of giving money to businesses that were destroyed by the looting and the rioting and the flipping over of cars. They're bailing people out who committed crimes.
Yeah, I mean, this is your typical Hollywood limousine liberal response, right? And this is their way of making themselves feel better about their position in life, which is by showing this sort of 5-mile distance sympathy for the oppressed by picking the wrong people, which is usually what happens. The people who are really being oppressed are the people who have to live in those neighborhoods, who now don't have grocery stores to go shopping in, who now don't have businesses to create a local economy there, and who are now not going to have jobs for themselves or for their kids.
Your comment on President Trump's announcement yesterday that if governors and mayors don't get control of the streets, then he will use the U.S. military as needed to gain control.
You know, we've used the U.S. The Insurrection Act of 1807 on a number of occasions. Most recently was 1992 in Los Angeles. It was still pretty controversial in '92. I was in Los Angeles at the time, and the LAPD was not going to regain control of those streets, in part because, again, the LAPD was part of the problem out there. And so they had to call in the National Guard, and they ended up calling in the active duty military to bolster them, because Los Angeles is a very big place, and it's difficult to spread out that far even with the National Guard. And I mean, this is one of the tools in the tool bag. And this is more than a week later after George Floyd's senseless murder on the streets of Minneapolis, and you still got people rioting in New York City over this. Clearly, this is out of control. It doesn't really have a whole lot to do with George Floyd anymore. And the only way that you put an end to this is to fill the space with security personnel. And if governors aren't willing to do that, then presidents can. Now, whether that's a wise choice is still debatable, because once you do that, it's sort of the you break it, you bought it sort of thing. The federal government ends up having to deal with all sorts of municipal issues that it normally doesn't have to deal with. It's a huge headache.
What about the police officer, David Chauvin? I thought he was supposed to be in court.
Derek,
excuse me. Derek Chauvin. He was supposed to be in court yesterday, and they postponed it for a week. Do you know why?
My guess is that the defense must have requested it, because normally you have to be arraigned within a certain period of time, or you have to be released. And so I'm guessing that the defense might be wanting to get some of its act together first before he's in there to get arraigned. But I wasn't clear on that either. But that would just be my guess. Under normal circumstances, that would be what happened. He's been transferred, by the way, to a prison rather than jail, because they didn't want him in with all the rioters they were bringing in.
What about the other 3 police officers? Any word on them and what's going on?
No word yet. No, I understand that Keith Ellison has been talking about this yesterday and apparently again this morning, saying that he's still reviewing those cases. He wants to bring charges to the full amount that he's capable of sustaining a conviction with in court. If I were the other 3 officers, I'd be expecting to get arrested at some point in time. Whether they can make the charges stick is another question, but I would expect from the video that at least 2 of those 3 officers are going to have a really big problem once they get into court.
Your reaction to the comparison, the criticism from Ilhan Omar up your way and others, that look at how the Reopen rally goers were treated by police versus how peaceful protesters of the George Ryan killing are being treated, and that tells you everything you need to know about systemic racism in police departments across America.
Well, I don't even understand the comparison, because the police response to the peaceful protesters over George Floyd's killing was actually pretty mild, and in fact, it was so passive that that's what sort of opened up the vacuum that allowed for the violent rioters to gain a toehold here. They didn't have enough people on the streets. They didn't have an assertive enough presence, and that was part of the problem. There was no violence at the reopening rallies. There was not even a hint of violence. It was a normal demonstration, granted for different purposes too. But I mean, I don't think anybody thought that was anybody other than overheated, hysterical news reporters thought that there was any danger in those demonstrations.
And in fact, you had police officers, including in Michigan, actually walking with the peaceful protesters.
Still, to this day, I mean, you have St. Paul police officers taking a knee in the street with the peaceful demonstrators out there to show sympathy for George Floyd. You have the National Guard has done some of the same things up here. I mean, the peaceful protests up here, there are people who are legitimately very angry and should be over what happened to George Floyd. And peaceful demonstrations are what this country is about. It's part of our freedom, and that's what the National Guard and the local police departments are supposed to protect.
How many times do we have to announce our agreement? How many times do we have to say?
Yeah.
I mean, this point was made by a reporter on Tucker Carlson's show yesterday. Like the surveying on this, like 97% of Americans thought the officer should be charged. I mean, you don't get 97% of Americans on anything, and on this. So why do we have to keep announcing that we're in agreement, that it was terrible, that it was criminal, that he should be charged, and he has been, and that justice should be meted out? To me, it seems like this is a way to, in a sense, our own virtue signaling and buying into the deflection away from what we're talking about, which is the reaction and the violence, not any disagreement with respect to the action of that former Minneapolis police officer to George Floyd.
Well, I don't know. I write for a living, so I don't start off my day without 2 or 3 good virtue signals.
Yes,
so,
of course.
That's just what I do, man.
Sure. Yeah. Right. You got to have all the qualifiers before I say anything of importance. I have to get that all out there.
That's just my style. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I agree with you, though. I mean, we've said it. I don't mind keep saying it because, unfortunately, what happens up here in Minneapolis is got a lot of problems with this. Is that we keep saying this, and to the point of the people who are doing the peaceful protesting anyway, things don't change a whole lot. I mean, to have somebody kneel on somebody's neck for 8 or 9 minutes, 3 of which the guy wasn't even breathing anymore, after all the other stuff that's gone up here with the Minneapolis Police Department, does tend to say that maybe we need to be saying this a little bit more often.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right. He is Ed Morrissey, senior editor for HotAir.com. Ed, always a pleasure. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me on.
Take care.
Thanks. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
If you're talking about it, Dan and Amy are talking about it. It's Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
This is attorney Stephen Leahy. This isn't the first crisis we faced together. Back in 2008, business professionals in trouble sought help from bankruptcy attorneys, loan modification attorneys, foreclosure defense attorneys, and IRS attorneys trying to gain full financial recovery. They should have just called me. Let me tell you about Chuck. His small business crashed in the 2008 crisis. He faced 2 foreclosures, overbearing creditors, and the dreaded IRS. Chuck would not even get out of bed in the morning. His wife heard me on the radio and convinced him to hire me. We got Chuck a loan modification and a short sale. We obtained a discharge of his debt and settled what was left of his IRS liability. Now Chuck is back in business and in control of his life. You can hear Chuck tell his own story at fullfinancialrecovery.com. We can get through this new crisis too. The time to start rebuilding is now. Don't let your life's work go down the drain. Get your free guide to recovery at fullfinancialrecovery.com. That's fullfinancialrecovery.com. Or call me right now at 312-664-6649. There's no time to waste. Fight back now.